Shalom, guys. How are you? It's a short live that I wanted to do. Just trying to deal with, or at least put out something in regards to the dedication on the altar that has been talked about in Jerusalem this past Hanukkah. And I wanted to make a short live to explain a little bit that what they did outside the Jaffa Gate is not an official altar. That is a reenactment. They do that once in a while. The Temple Institute is trying to bring in awareness of the temple functions and the services, and they invite people to do a reenactment. And the reason why it's a reenactment, whoever tells you that's a legitimate altar is not being truthful, and the Temple Institute would never call that a legitimate altar, although I'm not defending the institution, but in this case, they're not doing anything necessarily illegal according to the Torah. What the Temple Institute does, and I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I kind of have an idea what they're trying to do. They're educating people, because it is a educational platform. So they're educating people as to, the services and then the temple and things like that. And what they do, they take advantage of the Hanukkah or Pesach and some of the other things to give a glimpse of how more or less it would look like in the temple. I know it's not a legitimate altar because they didn't do it on the Temple Mount where it's supposed to be. They haven't measured, they haven't sanctified the area. They have kids on the podium. First of all, you're not going to do it outside the city walls. You have to do it inside the city walls. It has to be in a prescribed location. It cannot be just anywhere somebody feels like they want to do it. So when a lot of Christian people or people on the outside, they see what they were doing, they don't understand it. The altar has to be done in a particular manner. So clearly what we saw was a reenactment as to how the Tamid, the offering, was done. What's really sad, though, is reading comments and the wording on some of the comments that they're using in regards to the events that happened, which it should have been, in my opinion, based on my studies, a day of rejoicing because we get to really see that in our lifetime, the altar will be restored, and then we'll know the moment the altar is restored, we have signs that we can look for the coming of Messiah. It's a guide. What I saw was a lot of people speaking against the altar. Forget about what they were doing there in the Jaffa Gate. That was a reenactment. If you ask them, they tell you. It's just the people who are ignorant to the temple studies and how they make certain comments that are really anti-Semitic, and they are really anti-authority of God and his temple. And it comes to a point that we're going to have to eventually learn to educate ourselves in this topic. Clearly, the temple conversation is becoming prominent among us, but it's becoming prominent because people want to move the temple to the city of David, which is complete, ridiculous, ignorant, lack of education on archaeology and topography. And I can say that with the fullest confidence I can find, because we do have the evidence. But people want to move it. They just feel like they can move the tafnit, the pattern and the context. And I hate to be that straightforward, but it is true. You have to understand that some things you don't change. And, all you need to do is look at the topography in the time of Nehemiah and the topography there now and back then. And even now, the temple, according to its measurements, would not fit there. But hey, who cares about facts, right? We just need to move it. And there's not one archaeologist in Israel, not even Elisha Kron, which Joseph Good has him on video, saying that he believes the temple's on the Temple Mount. So don't believe the fake news. And Eilat Mazar, which I had the privilege to speak with her in February in regards to the temple, and she said something very meaningful to me. She said, the evidence establishes fact, and the evidence points to the Temple Mount, never the city of David. And by the way, this lady, Eilat Mazar, she's the one who found the palace of David in the city of David and the upper city. So right now, what the lack of understanding of the temple function, mind you, that the Bible specifically talks about a third temple. It does. People now minimize the book of Ezekiel, saying that is not true. That's the only way they can justify their theology. So when you have things like you saw the Sanhedrin inviting the 70 nations to see it, immediately people start thinking that that is about the altar, and they start saying, well, that's an abomination, but yet they have no idea the rules of the temple. They don't even know what an abomination is. Now, if they would have started that altar and they would have said, this is the altar, and they would have done a sacrifice, a literal sacrifice there. First of all, the altar was not the size it's supposed to be. Second of all, the little kids are not allowed to be in that area. Third, they are outside the city walls. It's not holy. Okay? There's so many things that if you understand the temple service, you look at it and you go, oh, that's a cool reenactment. That's all it is. Okay? And sadly, I have to do a short live because there are many people within the Hebrew roots that, with all due respect to all of you, we're still thinking like in the system of religion, and we cannot discern one thing from the other. We need to eventually start researching this. Even if you don't agree, at least research it. When we speak without the knowledge, we stumble on things, and we make other people stumble, and we come into a problem of credibility because we're not educating ourselves as to how to determine these things. And immediately people say, oh, the Zionists. And I had one guy tell me last night that if they don't believe in Yeshua, if the priests that are working in that temple don't believe in Yeshua, then it's not valid. And I'm going like, where in the world do we find anything in the Torah that says that for the priests to do their service in the temple, it was a requirement of biblical law for them to believe in Yeshua? With all due respect to you guys, that's a Christian mindset, trying to just put Yeshua everywhere unless it's not valid. Listen, I'm a believer in the Messiah. Okay, I'm a believer in Yeshua. Strong believer in Yeshua as my Messiah. But the Torah specifically gave the office of the priesthood on the earth to the priesthood just because it was a gift. There was no condition. This is a gift for your loyalty. Now, you're going to protect the holiness of the mounts, but the priesthood is a gift to you. Now, you're responsible for it, but it's a gift to you. In the first century, Yeshua resurrected, and you never saw him in the temple. Did you ever see? The perfect opportunity for Yeshua to really establish his authority and for everybody to know that the temple was no longer valid was for him to resurrect, go into the temple, kick out all the priests, and start and eliminate all the sacrifices. Did he do that after he resurrected? No. Did he do that before his death? No. Did any of the disciples did that after the resurrection? No. So clearly, we don't know what the hell we're talking about. We really don't know what we're talking about. We are making up stuff, coming into the Hebrew roots banner, and acting like in the systems of religion, and then when something dramatic, important happens in Israel, we call it an abomination, and we call it of the devil, antichrist, and the real anti-Semitic spirit comes out. We need to change. We need to reevaluate which direction we're going, because this is the temple we're dealing with. It's bad enough we have people saying this in the city of David. Now, 99.999 of all the evidence points to the Temple Mount, but only less than 1% believes that is actually in the city of David, and the whole Christian world and half of the Messianic movement runs after those guys. I don't get it. Why do we have to, are we hating the Jewish people so much that we cannot see the temple on the Temple Mount where it's supposed to be? Do we hate the Jewish people so much that when they're trying to teach the world how to restore the authority of God on the earth by showing us for the first time in 2,000 years what used to happen in the temple, which is a high level of worship to God? If you study the temple, you would understand that would be it. Now we believers in Yeshua are start putting preconditions as to what is acceptable and what is not. Newsflash, people, we did not write the Bible. It was God who gave the command to Moses. We do not determine policy. It's got to come to a point that we have to learn to study and to research, verify, and please let us stop just opening our mouth and talking without thinking. So what happened in Jerusalem? Well, I was there. It's a reenactment of what the service would have looked like if the temple was standing. By the way, no one would have been able to be that close if that was a real altar. You would have had the priest guarding the temple. Anybody would come clear. The guy talking on the phone, he would have never been there with those garments that close to the altar. So anyone who really understood the temple service would have seen it and would have said, wow, we have a reenactment of what the temple would have looked like. Oh my God, that means that the authority of the Lord is going to be restored on the earth. And then once the altar is rebuilt in the future, we will know then who the anti-Messiah will be. Then we'll know exactly when Messiah will return, because it tells us once the Tamid offering is the abomination is to stop the Tamid. You stop the Tamid, you know then how many days. Listen, I'm not the smartest guy in the world here. Okay, I mean, I study so I can learn. But one of the things that I've learned from my teacher was, don't teach anything you don't know. Verify everything you're going to teach. And, sadly, I have to say that right now our movement, sadly, is becoming a stumbling block, because we have branches within the Hebrew roots that have brought in all the anti-Semitic stuff from the church, replacement theology. You dress it up with a few Hebrew words, and now you start attacking the temple. I'm going to make this statement, and this is a serious one. Israel did not protect the sanctity of the place, of the temple, and they suffered exile. The priesthood did not do what they were supposed to. They suffered exile. We have not had a temple in Jerusalem in 2,000 years, which is the authority and the house of God on the earth, where he places his feet, the throne of God. Think about that. Now, we were grafted in yesterday. Barely knowing the Bible. And now we're calling things an abomination when we don't even study the function of the temple. Let us be careful what we say, because the world is watching. And many people are listening. And we're supposed to be the voice of reason. We're supposed to be that voice that brings balance. Tikkun Olam, the restoration of all things. We're not doing a really good job at it. And when you start mixing the temple with salvation, then you really don't know the function of the temple. Clearly, salvation is a gift to those who believe in Yeshua. That doesn't exclude the temple. That doesn't do away with the temple. So, we have to eventually turn the page and begin to study in the areas that we don't really study. Clearly, by some of the comments, it shows the high level of misunderstanding, or if I will use this word without being offensive, ignorance to the topic. And I do have some teachings on my website in regards to this. Joseph Good, my teacher, has a website, that deals specifically with this. We have courses. We have, I don't know what else we can do to help you. And we do research, archaeological, historical, topographical, biblical. We put in rabbinical writings to connect everything in the Bible. Please take time to, hi Daniel, how are you, bro? Take time to read this stuff. What they did in Jerusalem was a reenactment, was not a real altar. And every single one of you going amok on Facebook, calling that an abomination, shame on you. You have no idea about the temple. You have no idea about the altar. Clearly shows your ignorance to the temple. And when you call that an abomination, and that, what Jesus did is done away with, whatever, clearly you're not understanding the functions of the temple either. There are different levels of transgression in the Bible. There are different levels of different types of sacrifices. And, I don't know how in the world that James told Paul to do a Nazirite vow, which includes sacrifices 28 years after Yeshua died and resurrected. Explain that one. If the logic is an altar and a temple is an abomination to God because of what Yeshua did by dying and resurrecting, right? Then why would James, the brother of Yeshua, tell Paul to do a Nazirite vow, which includes 3 animals per person? It doesn't make any sense. They have to go to the feast every year. Passover, well, Yeshua is your last sacrifice? Well, then how come they were keeping Passover every year for 40 straight years in the temple in Jerusalem? People who believe in Yeshua, why were they going to the temple? The New Testament is not difficult to read. and is there. So either we are really lacking of understanding and this education because of the replacement theology and the anti-Semitic spirit within the heart of the system of religion that still exists to this day, or we just don't want to see the truth. So do we know about the type of sacrifices to know about what Yeshua did for us? No. Do we know about the location of the temple? No. We want to move it to a different place that makes no logical sense at all. You know, it comes to a point that we have to just learn to shut our mouth a little bit and study a little bit more, because this is a big responsibility, ladies and gentlemen. This is the house of God. This is the temple. This is not a supposition. This is not an opinion. This is a blueprint that God has prescribed for men to come and approach him, for men to come and honor him. He revealed that blueprint to Moses. Then he revealed that blueprint to David. David gave it to Solomon. Then later, the Lord revealed the blueprint to Ezekiel. So therefore, this is God ordained. This is the law of the temple. This is not the law according to Rico. Ezekiel 43 clearly says it. This is the law of the temple. We are to learn all of the entrances, the exits, the doors, the dimensions, the blueprint. And it tells you, and this is the good thing here, it says, speak, O son of man, speak to the house of Israel and show them the house, so that they may be ashamed of their abomination. That verse is specifically directed to every Hebrew roots person who calls themselves the house of Israel. Interesting. The Lord prophesied through the prophet Ezekiel to show the design in the house, to learn every law of the temple to the house of Israel, so that they may be ashamed of their abomination. And that's the last commandment that anybody cares about. They don't study it. And it's designed to show the shame that we have caused the house of the Lord. Something to think about, because constantly there's something going on. All the time there's something new. But let me give you a word of warning, ladies and gentlemen. Listen, you can talk about all the extracurricular studies that you do, and you can argue all you want about everything. But the moment the altar is rededicated, all of those comments come with a heavy price of judgment. Because the moment you start speaking against the altar, you're not speaking against the Jews. You will not be speaking against Zionists. You're not going to be speaking against priests. You're not going to be speaking against the Temple Institute or any other organization. When the altar is dedicated, you will be speaking against the owner of the house. Let me ask you a question. If the temple is defiled already and it is an abomination, how can the Antichrist defile something that is already defiled? So clearly, this is going to carry a level of kedusha, of holiness, that, with all the respect to all of you, it has nothing to do with Yeshua. It has all to do with the restoration of the kingdom. So if you speak against the altar, have it known today that you're speaking against God's throne, the place where he dwells, the place that he has placed his name. According to the Bible, that is the footstool on the earth. And that's exactly what Yeshua came to do, restore the authority of God on the earth. And the temple has a huge meaning about the restoration of this. And I stand as a witness against anyone who speaks against the altar, because I know and I recognize what the altar represents. It's not about the death of the animals, guys. It's about the blood. That blood and the manipulation of the blood is the important part of the temple service. We need to learn. It's time for the Hebrew roots to stop thinking like Christian theology and train ourselves. We come up with 50,000 different ways to pronounce the divine name of God, and also the divine and the name of Yeshua. And we take all this time to move the temple to the city of David, which it makes no sense topographical, geographically, historically, archaeologically, biblically. But we don't take the time to actually learn how to really honor God in his temple the right way. I mean, are we really that hateful of Jewish people that we want to change everything they do because it's Jewish? That only shows where we're headed. And history will repeat itself. Antisemitism is rampant in Europe. It's happening in the United States. is going to reach us. And let me tell you something. When you turn against the house of God, when you turn against his rule and his kingship, when you turn against his authority and his temple, we will suffer as a nation and as a body curses, because now we are transgressing against the holy. Something to think about as I was reading and looking into some of the stuff that I see on Facebook. And this is the area that I study. I'm still searching, I'm still learning, but I do have an idea about. This is not, supposing or an opinion. We research this, we look it up. And I'm still willing to correct any mistake I make. I'm still willing to say, hey, if I'm wrong in this, I'm wrong. Listen, if I've gone to Jerusalem 2 years in a row. And that's not on top of the trips that I do on my tour. Just 2 years in a row, just for the sole purpose of doing research on the archaeology, the topography, and then geography. So I could see for myself, not on books, but being there, talk to people on the ground, doing the research on the ground, that the temple is on the Temple Mount. I want to know. I'll go to the city of David. I go to all these places. I study it myself. And the evidence points to the Temple Mount. So don't believe the fake news, guys. Stay with the research. Do your research. Go to people who really know their stuff. Eilat Mazar, Lee Ridmeyer, Joseph Good, Conrad Sheik, Charles Warren, Periotti. Then you have Vogue. Then you have the PEF, the Palestine Exploration Fund, founded back in the 1800s. They did all the archaeology. Then you have Mishnah, Eliezer ben Yaakov. You have Josephus, the letter of Aristeas. You have also all the resources that we can use. Oh, Ehud Netzer, who talks about all the constructions of Herod. We have so much information. Notice, I'm not putting myself in that group because I'm nowhere near that group. I'm only researching this. I'm a student of the temple. But we need to look at all the information to have a better balance, because the time will come when that altar that you saw, the reenactment, it will be the real one. And you better know exactly how they do it. Because if they do something wrong, those people carry the guilt. They need to do the right thing. Okay? And the thing about it is, when that altar goes up, then I'll know we are definitely in the last days. So instead of wasting all your time speaking badly against the throne of my king and turning against the people who are trying to restore the authority of my king, meditate and think before you speak. This is the temple. We are commanded, according to the prophets, Ezekiel, to study the law of the house. Ezekiel 43, verse 10 to 12. Read it. I challenge you. Go and read it. How much time do you dedicate on the temple? Oh, we want to keep the commandments. Oh, we keep Torah. We keep Torah. If you're not doing what Ezekiel 43, verse 10 to 12 says, then we're not doing what we're called to do. We only part of what we're supposed to do. Okay? So I say this because, yes, I'm zealous for the house. This is my passion. But it is my passion only because I recognize that God commanded it. And I want to do what the Lord says to do. My desire is to share. My desire is to edify. My desire is to correct from people who don't know nothing about the temple and yet have an opinion. Those who speak before hearing a matter is foolishness to them. No wonder Solomon says that in the prophets. It is so true. And when it comes to the temple, we got too many people making comments and having all these opinions without having the clue about the sacrifices, their function, how the service was done, how the temple service, what does it represent? How come there's going to be a temple in the third? In the millennium? How come every time in the ancient world when a king would win major battles, they will build a temple to their gods? In every ancient history of the ancient world, they did that. The Romans conquered Jerusalem. What do? They built a temple to Jupiter on the Temple Mount. The Muslims defeat the Romans in the Crusades. They build a dome on the spot of the Temple of Jupiter on the Temple Mount where the temple was. History. It doesn't take very long. We have more information today about this stuff than ever before. And we are probably turning backwards. It's incredible. With Google, with YouTube, with all the books and everything. We have more information than ever before. We have more resource than ever before, and yet we are thinking backwards. We don't go forward. Do you think the Lord is going to sit idle? He brings us from the dispersion, from shame, from desolation, away from covenant. Gentiles in the flesh who have brought near by the blood of Messiah, grafted into the olive branches, so that now we can just determine who is belonging to Israel, where the temple is, and when the feasts are, and when the Sabbaths take place, and all this stuff. We're supposed to be obedient. We're supposed to just be grateful. We're supposed to be in awe of God for the opportunity to be in the kingdom. But no, we don't want now. We don't want that. We want to tell God now when we want to show up and which feast days based on our calendar. We want to tell God when the temple is going to be starting, how it's going to be, who is supposed to officiate. Because if they don't have all the criteria that we have determined based on our theology, then it's not valid. Ladies and gentlemen, who do we think we are? We are servants of the King. We don't determine policy in his kingdom. So, going back to the first point, the Temple Institute did an amazing job doing a reenactment of what the temple would have looked like. The fact that on that stage, we had men of Aron. Now, I had one guy said, well, how do you know those guys are from Aron? Do you understand the laws of the temple? Let me give you an idea. The laws of the temple is that those guys, if you understand the laws, you will know that no man in their right mind, if they're not a son of Aron, will stand on that platform misrepresenting who they are. Let me tell you why. The Lord spoke to Aron. That's Aron and his sons. Numbers 18, verse 1 through 6. I'm going to read these verses to give you an example about the real situation that you saw on that video. When I saw sons of Aron standing on that platform wearing the white garments, you just don't pick those guys from the corner and say, hey, yo, man, I'm going to do a reenactment or something. Will you come and hang out? Will you wear these garments? This is not Hollywood pretend. You know, for those guys to stand out there and to wear the white garments, they have to be sons of Aron, and they have the DNA to prove it. So it's not just through the custom of preserving their identity, but they have the DNA. The DNA has been found. You know, J1C3 or P58 haplogroup. We know this. This is no secret. Those guys to stand there has to be a son of Aron, because if not, they're misrepresenting God. No one who's not a son of Aron can stand on the temple altar, on the platform of the priest when this is done. Okay. And the Lord spoke to Aron, you and your sons with you, and the Father's house with you shall bear the iniquity of the sanctuary, and you and your sons with you shall bear the iniquity of your priesthood. That means that if they do a service and they do it wrong, they are guilty. And the people are not going to suffer. They bear the guilt. You want to be a priest? That means that whatever you decide to do, whatever you do will harm the body of Messiah or the kingdom. You bear the guilt. You're responsible for every single one of them. You want to be a priest? That's what they have to do. And the brethren also, the tribe of Levi, the tribe of your father, bring you near to me, bring them near to you, that they may be joined unto you and minister unto you. So the Levites are to help the priest. They're not to do the job of the priest. They're to facilitate. But there are rules for them. Watch. And they shall keep thy charge and the charge of all the tent. Only they should not, this is the Levites, only they should not come unto the vessels of the sanctuary and unto the altar, that they may that they die not, neither they or you. That means that if you are not a son of Aron and you go up on the altar and you die, but if the sons of Aron allowed anyone to go on the altar that is not a son of Aron, not only that person dies, but the priest would also die. So we need to understand this. It's a huge responsibility. Oh, by the way, nowhere in these verses, and I'm very pro Yeshua, that's my Messiah, but nowhere in these verses do you see that it's a requirement for the priest to know Yeshua in order for them to do their office. That makes no logical sense. I mean, so that means you have to be a believer in Yeshua when you go see a doctor. If not, the doctor's not valid. Or you need to have a lawyer who's a believer in Yeshua. If not, the law is not valid. Or then you got to have a driver Oh, I'm going to go to the corner. Hey, Uber driver, are you a believer in Yeshua? Because if you're not a believer in Yeshua, then I can't get in the car with you because you're not a valid driver. That makes no logical sense. You know, we have to think a little more. We're not thinking, we're reacting, because to many people, the altar is actually an affront to their theology, because the moment the altar goes up, then you have to explain yourself why you cannot withhold your offerings and your tithe in your congregations. Now you have to send it to Jerusalem according to the Torah. Then you have to also respect the feast according how the Sanhedrin Council and they declare it in Jerusalem. And also you cannot change anything on the temple. Your authority is done away with, is gone back to Jerusalem. They are responsible. Oh, God already gave them the responsibility to do it the right way. You know, we don't need to steal somebody's authority because we are people coming into the kingdom by grace through faith. We should be grateful to be in the kingdom. And you shall keep the charge of the sanctuary and the charge of the altar, that there be wrath no more upon the children of Israel. And I, behold, I have taken your brethren, the Levites, from among the children of Israel. This is what the Lord says. He took the Levites from among the children of Israel. To you, they are a gift. They are a gift to the priests, given unto the Lord, to do the service of the tent of meeting. And you and your sons with you shall keep your priesthood for everything at the altar, and for that which within the veil. And you shall serve. I give the priesthood as a gift. I give the priesthood as a service of gift. Listen to this one. And the stranger that cometh near shall be put to death. And says, and the Lord spoke unto Aaron, and I, behold, I have given you the charge of my heave offerings and all the hallowed things of the children of Israel. Unto you I have given them by reason of the anointing, and to your sons as a portion forever. Nowhere in the commandment here, number says that they need to believe in Yeshua to do their office. Now, would I love for them to believe in Yeshua? Yes. But do they need to believe in Yeshua to officiate as a priest? No. And it pains me to say it, but it's the truth. It's the biblical truth. So anyway, we need to reconsider the direction we're going, and we need to really think hard before we start making some really, really, really out of place comments. Listen, I don't get into all the arguments. I got better things to do. You want to study different names, you want to study that's fine, whatever. But when it comes to the temple, this is the law of the temple, guys. Please, this is where God dwelled with his people. This is his sacred space. It is holy. It is where the righteousness of God dwells. And whatever my king says, we need to respect. I pray that this 33 minutes was a loving correction, and maybe you will consider about it and think on it, and maybe decide to research it more. Research it more. You know, I expect the world not to agree with it. I expect the Christian people not to understand it because they don't teach it. But when people come into the Hebrew roots or the Messianics, and I start seeing some of the ridiculous comments about the temple, it only shows, and I'm going to say it, it only shows that many of you are still Christian in theology. You just put on a Hebrew roots hat. Either we get out of the system of thinking and make a transition to learn these things so we can have better balance, so that now we can educate one another and become edifying factor on this earth with a mission. What is our true mission? To do righteousness and justice so that we can take people up to Jerusalem, like Zechariah says. Zechariah 14 says clearly that when Messiah returns, they have to go up to Jerusalem to pay tribute, the Feast of Tabernacles, because the temple will be standing. You want to call that temple an abomination? By the way, I'll remind you, Zechariah 14 is the Messianic age. Yeshua is going to be there, and he's going to be in that temple. I would like for some of you to go argue with Messiah about the validity of that temple. It's going to be an interesting conversation that I'll be watching from afar. Be blessed, guys. Thank you for your time. Shalom. And don't believe what I say, verify what I say. Amen? Take care. Bye-bye.